The spiritual and super are prone to blending well together in the pages of comics. With characters exemplifying the same ideals illustrated by the deistic pantheons of generations past, it's no wonder superheroes lend themselves well to supernatural discussions. The Catholicism of those such as Daredevil and Nightcrawler, the mythology of Atlantis and Wakanda. The Marvel Universe has spirituality coursing through its veins. The modern beating heart of Marvel's heavier discourse is Mark Spector, better known to readers as Moon Knight. Spector wrestles with religious devotion in uniquely compelling ways, all the while tending to a rather volatile case of dissociative identity disorder. He is, for a lack of better words, a messed up character, but that only adds to his appeal. With every new problem Moon Knight confronts, another olive branch is extended to readers who may agonize over the very same thing. And also, like readers, Moon Knight has a fascinating history that depicts a man hounded from birth by forces of persecution and intimidation. But before we enter the mad maze that is Moon Knight, don't forget to like and subscribe, as this is a brand new channel and we appreciate all the support we can get. Alright, so Mark Spector grows up on the poor side of Chicago, the son of Jewish rabbi Elias Spector, who escapes Hitler's regime once it reaches Czechoslovakia. Mark is shocked when his father comes home one day bearing a swastika cruelly carved into his forehead. The young boy refuses to accept his father's failure to fight back, developing a chip on his shoulder regarding bullies and oppressors. Displaying aggressive tendencies, Mark takes up boxing and is confronted by his father after a fight. In a stunning rebuke, Mark actually downs his father right there in the ring in front of hundreds of people. This is such a stunning moment that I honestly gasped when I turned to the panel. Mark's early days not only instill within readers his sense of morality, but the significance of his heritage. Being a Jewish hero allows writers to examine the unfortunate topic of anti-Semitism through Moon Knight, contributing to the idea that every group of people should have a superhero to look up to. Now, perhaps Moon Knight's signature trait is his dissociative identity disorder, the mental illness that leads to his multiple personalities. The development of this disorder stems from an event in his childhood involving a family friend. Rabbi Yitz Perlman, a figure Mark considers an uncle, is secretly the former Nazi soldier and serial killer Ernst. Responsible for the creation of such horrible figures as Red Skull and Hatemonger, Ernst fled Germany once he surmised that Hitler's end was near and settled in Chicago. His synagogue had a secret room for his devilish deeds, and he is committing his crimes there one day when Mark stumbles upon the scene. The young Spector escapes, but not before Ernst promises to return if the child ever gives up his secret. In a chilling move, Ernst vanishes afterward and is not heard from again, not even by his closest of friends. Understandably, young Mark is traumatized by this and is thus set upon his path of living with DID. Following Ernst's disappearance, Mark meets Khonshu, the ancient Egyptian god of the moon and Mark's future master, for the very first time in his life. The deity professes to be Mark's true creator and parent, foreshadowing momentous events to come in the young man's life. He is entered into the Putnam Psychiatric Hospital by his father, but is only there a little while before the latter passes away. When given permission to attend his father's funeral, Mark takes the opportunity to escape at the behest of Khonshu. With the myriad of differences between them, as well as the emerging father figure in Khonshu, Mark resents his father Elias heavily. Also, it should not be lost on readers the symbolic nature of Mark embracing his new father's direction whilst attending his old father's funeral. Khonshu is the birth of a new Mark Spector. He enlists in the Marines along with his brother Randall, and they serve 3 years before Mark is dishonorably discharged due to his mental illness. After a brief stint with the CIA, he naturally moves into mercenary work along with a friend he meets in an illegal fighting ring, Frenchie Duchamp, as well as again his brother Randall. Their gun-for-hire work sends them globe-trotting to places like South America, Africa, and Europe. During an operation in Italy, Randall actually betrays Mark and murders Lisa Maloney, the woman Mark loves. Once again demonstrating his relatable but undeniably vengeful tendencies, Mark hunts down and seemingly kills his brother with a well-placed grenade. Continuing his run of bad luck with associates, Mark and Frenchie meet Raoul Bushman while in Egypt. Escorting an archaeological team in Sudan, Bushman massacres the majority of them and fatally wounds Mark after he stands up for Marlene Alrane, the daughter of one of the scientists. Mark is left for dead in the desert but manages to crawl to the tomb despite his injury, reaching Marlene and Frenchie even as he starts to grow weaker. His friends place him at the base of a Khonshu statue, prompting a spiritual interface between Mark and the deity. Khonshu proposes a resurrection, granted Mark serves the moon god. He is then restored to life and wipes out Bushman's remaining men while their leader slips away. While accepting the deal and being revived, survived, Mark would consider his encounter with Khonshu a mere hallucination, which is not an uncommon thing for a dying man. What is uncommon are Mark's abilities upon being resurrected. The deity strengthens the capacity of Mark's mind, granting him resistance to telepathic attacks. Foreshadowed by his revival and reaffirmed repeatedly throughout his life, Mark is also given immortality thanks to Khonshu. Sadly, Mark Spector meets his end several times throughout his life, but the power of Khonshu always proves too much for even the forces of death. These abilities, combined with Mark's special ops training and mercenary experience, endow Khonshu's champion with unfathomable potential. After his rather tumultuous time in Africa, Mark returns to New York with Frenchie and Marlene and begins his vigilantism as Moon Knight. And it is here that we begin to see Mark conceptualize and utilize his multiple personalities to facilitate his superhero activities. When Mark returns to New York, he employs the Stephen Grant financer identity to pay for his vigilante activities. In an indelibly clever move, Mark's Jake Lockley identity takes the role of an informant for Moon Knight as he cruises the streets of New York in his taxi cab. However, with Grant, Lockley, and Moon Knight all taking up space in his head, the original identity of Mark Spector begins to fade into the recesses of his mind. He tracks down Bushman, but the villain employs another foe, Midnight Man, to shatter Spector's Khonshu idol. Mark's tenuous grasp on his identity spirals out of control. Marlene, now Mark's girlfriend, gives him a fake idol but claims it is real out of desperation for her lover's well-being. Quite frankly, I can't say I wouldn't do the same if I were in her place. Seeing a loved one suffer is agonizing, and for a time, Marlene is spared this when Mark buys it as the real deal. After this brush with disaster, Moon Knight faced two more foes that would stay in his orbit for a long time. Morpheus, a physically enhanced patient of Marlene's brother, and Black Spectre, a candidate for mayor named Carson Knowles. Aside from his handful of foes, Moon Knight would not receive a substantial assignment until he is approached by a group of businessmen known as the Committee. They are seeking the capture of Jack Russell, better known as Werewolf, and Spectre obliges with relative ease given his core susceptibility to silver. Moon Knight equips his Silver Cestus, a part of his gloves with knuckle tips added, and subdues the fearsome creature. However, the Committee actually plans to transform Russell's sister, Lissa, into a werewolf as well and deploy them as weapons. In his first published appearance in Marvel Comics, Moon Knight demonstrates his character by instead freeing Jack and helping him take down the Committee. And at this point, you may be beginning to see the tonal trend in Moon Knight's stories. They tend to be rather adult and horror tinged as opposed to more mainstream characters like the Incredible Hulk or Spider-Man. Speaking of which, yeah, despite his more antisocial tendencies, Moon Knight does carry out justice with others from time to time. He works with Hulk during their brief partnership with the Defenders, where they battle a couple of life model decoys of the Zodiac, a cartel focused on, you guessed it, world domination. Other members he works with here include Clea, Hellcat, and Valkyrie, which all in all makes for a particularly formidable Defenders roster. Not to mention, largely female, which is impressive given it was released in the 70s. Another lovely reminder that Marvel Comics was working to move the genre forward in terms of representation even back then. Moon Knight then collaborates with Spider-Man to take down Cyclone, who is actually employed by the Masked Marauder. However, the heroes start off on a bad note as Spidey mistakes Moon Knight for a villain, largely due to Mark's violent tendencies showing themselves with a mob lackey. After a brief scuffle, the two move past their initial misgivings with each other and work well enough together to subdue Cyclone, though they are unable to capture the Marauder. This is the heroes' first meeting in the comics and certainly works in contrast to two's differing habits and ideologies. For example, Moon Knight uses his Jake Lockley and Stephen Grant personalities in the comic, something that I cannot imagine Peter ever forgetting. It begs the question, how do heroes work ethically with Moon Knight knowing his instabilities? And perhaps this is one of the questions the many writers of Moon Knight want us to wrestle with. When does Mark Spector go from hero to victim? And how does one operate when both reside in the same person? Moon Knight returns to the solo act with an investigation into a killer dubbed the Hatchet Man. Suspecting it to be his presumed dead brother Randall, Mark reluctantly uses Marlene as bait to lure the killer out into Central Park. The authorities show up though and spook the Hatchet Man, who takes Marlene hostage. In a ploy to escape, the killer hatchets Marlene and sends Mark's memory spiraling back to the murder of Lisa Maloney at the hands of Randall. Understandably enraged, Moon Knight follows Hatchet Man and saves another hostage from his grasp. After a brief fight, Mark's demons are apparently put to rest when Hatchet Man is impaled on a tree branch. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm assuming he did it by accident. Marlene's fate, however, is left more up in the air as she recovers in the hospital. Marlene recovers and life returns to normal for Mark Spector, or at least what passes for normal in his case. Then, a truly macabre occurrence in the form of the corpse of Amos Lardner, an associate of Spector's from his CIA days, arrives in a box on his doorstep. Turns out it's a message from the Company, an organization that has taken Marlene hostage in Paris and is seeking to wipe out Spectre thanks to his knowledge of Operation Cobra. An agent of the Company, James Lardner, becomes the embodiment of Operation Cobra, a cold, calculating killing machine. However, Moon Knight is too skilled for the living weapon and defeats him, taking the time to mail his body to the Company before returning home with Marlene. And I mean, I guess that is one way to get across your adversary's failure, plus I'm sure it felt great to return the favor. And with a generic name like The Company, these villains were bound to not last too long. Now, every hero gets tired, whether it's of saving the world or constantly living in fear of your loved ones meeting your colorful rogues gallery. No matter which of these reasons you may gravitate towards, I can give you one that will make most heroes rethink the whole superhero thing. How about being unable to walk? Now, unless you're Barbara Gordon, most people would consider retiring following such a substantial physical injury. Moon Knight is no different, losing his ability to walk for a time after a battle with the Fly. While in dialogue with the spirit of a priest of Khonshu, he decides to give up his alternate identities and settle down with Marlene. Momentous and yet quite a journey Mark must go on to rid himself of his supernatural baggage. Mark certainly goes a distance to make his retirement work. He sells the idol of Khonshu in Paris and abandons his Stephen Grant identity. This doesn't last long as Khonshu delivers a vision to Mark, warning him that the idol was now in the hands of evil. Mark visits the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, where he meets 3 Khonshu priests and inherits the Fist of Khonshu mantle, thus reclaiming his identity as Moon Knight. This comes at a particularly heavy price as Marlene ends up leaving him. Mark returns to his vigilanteism with quite the assist. He helps the time-displaced West Coast Avengers return to the present after a brief sojourn to Pharaonic Egypt. It's during this time that Mark begins seeing Tigra, a member of the West Coast Avengers. He stays with the team to fight both the High Evolutionary and Night Shift, while also receiving assistance from Hellstrom regarding his condition. Establishing a new normal, Khonshu leaves Mark's psyche at Hellstrom's urging, giving Moon Knight complete control over his thoughts. It's striking that Khonshu is portrayed much like the religious figures of the traditional faiths, influencing followers in subtle ways and effectively residing within the psyche of his adherents. There comes a time in just about every superhero's life that they must take on an heir to their legacy, a sidekick if you will. Moon Knight is no different, though he admittedly finds his in a strange place. The son of his old foe, Midnight Man, Jeff Wild, approaches Spectre after fighting injustice as the hero's right-hand man, Midnight. However, this partnership would end in tragedy when Midnight was killed during the events of Secret Empire. Moon Knight, now without a sidekick, must go up against some of his most capable opponents yet, in the form of Shadow Knight and Moonshade. The former is Mark's long-lost brother Randall, while the latter is a doppelganger of Moon Knight. Calling upon his allies once more, Mark defeats Shadow Knight with the aid of the Punisher and overcomes Moonshade on his own. Mark Spector's history with Khonshu, as well as his various brushes with death, then bring him to the attention of the goddess, an aspect of Adam Warlock. Cited as one of the most spiritual beings on the planet, Mark is brought to the goddess's planet, Paradise Omega, and convinced that she is the only way to eliminate evil in the universe. And I'm sure you guys will be pretty shocked when you hear who saves him. Thanos. He returns him to Earth while also destroying the goddess's planet. Moon Knight has now demonstrated characteristics that speak to yet another group of people, those who nurse a spiritual devotion to a particular god or set of tenets. While the character has understandably been relegated to the niche, he might as well be mainstream for those influenced by his adventures. His luck runs out though when his company Spectre Corp is attacked with a computer virus. Mark Spector meets his end as his company literally collapses around him. However, Mark does not stay entombed for long as Khonshu shortly resurrects him to combat the deity's ancient rival, Set, the Egyptian god of war. The latter resurrects Moon Knight's old foes, Bushman, Black Spectre, and Morpheus. However, this conflict does come to a swift end when Mark smashes their idol of Set. Mark should really be getting used to the threat his ghost continuously posed to him. After his brush with the forces of Set, Mark must contend with the CIA's goons trying to assassinate him thanks to his in-depth knowledge of their operations and tactics. With the help of a new flame, Candace Calder, Mark exposes the operation and manages to live a little longer. Taking a break from his usual concerns, Mark diverts to Wakanda, where he helps T'Challa reconnect with the patron spirit of the nation, the Panther god, Bast. This episode is short but illustrates the apparent good intentions of Khonshu when he helps Mark and T'Challa complete their task. It's always a wonderful thing when writers come up with creative ways to intertwine our favorite superheroes. Drawing off of both heroes' respective spiritual influences and allowing them to utilize their heritages together makes this a poignant chapter for Mark. Ostensibly inspired by his time with the heroic T'Challa, Mark actively funds a new iteration of the Marvel Knights. The group operates for a brief period before its headquarters are destroyed by the villainous Maximilian Zaran. Crushed by this defeat, Mark retires from his vigilantism once again. Bushman reappears, but is quickly killed off by Spectre, with the latter carving off his nemesis's face afterward. However, the entire thing is orchestrated by a new committee, the inaugural foes of Moon Knight from his debut appearance. During this time, Frenchie comes out of the closet to Mark and is savagely beaten by an eavesdropping assailant. Mark decides to track down this man, rediscovering his heroic instincts due to his old friend's misfortune. His relationship with Khonshu also takes a decidedly adverse turn, as the deity's appearance is now tainted by the face of Bushman. Further, Khonshu admits to influencing the committee to attack Mark in order to bring about a more vengeful turn in his champion. Finally, the superhuman civil war also reaches Moon Knight during this time, but he is able to register as an independent and go virtually unsupervised. And that's pretty much just the writers saying, yeah, we don't want to deal with all this superhero infighting, just let us write Moon Knight. Disturbed by Moon Knight's activities in New York, Norman Osborn enlists the villain's hood and profile to take the vigilante out. They begin by putting together a strike force, which includes Mark's resurrected foe, Bushman. This guy will not go away. Moon Knight nearly kills the latter when they face off at a warehouse, but refrains from it when Khonshu intervenes. It's not entirely clear why the deity decides to step in, but it's probably to avoid any negative effects on the pair's relationship. After all, Khonshu's apparition bore Bushman's face the last time Mark followed through on his violent instincts. Then, in a stunning move, Mark relocates to Los Angeles and operates as the only Avenger in the area. He is approached by Captain America, Spider-Man, and Wolverine, and is encouraged to curb the rising crime in the area. During his activities, he comes across some thugs with an Ultron head, which he tries to return to the Avengers. Yet an astonishing twist is revealed when Cap, Spidey, and Wolverine are shown to be hallucinations, embodiments of Mark's new emerging identities. As a fan of Wolverine, I particularly enjoy it when this identity takes over once a new enemy, Count Nefaria, murders Mark's on-again, off-again flame, Echo. Paying tribute to Wolverine through an entirely different character is an impressive feat, and the writers managed to convey the angsty, bitter rage that boils beneath Logan's cool surface. The Ultron head is eventually given to Tony Stark, whom Mark bases another identity of his off of. Understandably, the moral identity that develops within him is modeled after the late Echo. Abandoning his traumatic surroundings in LA, Mark returns to New York and actually begins trying to go straight. He develops a new, more professional persona in the form of Mr. Knight, who interacts with NYPD Detective Flint. Mark faces an unforeseen challenge in the form of a psychiatrist, Elisa Warsame, attempting to extract Khonshu from his psyche and take the mantle for herself. She succeeds and carries a deity within her mind before he ends up returning to Mark. I mean, can you guys imagine someone like Dr. Phil being the villain of a superhero story? Although perhaps it would be the first daytime superhero soap opera. Mark finds himself in a familiar setting, a mental hospital, this time sent there by Khonshu. However, things are not as they seem, as it is revealed that this is actually an illusion, an exercise by Khonshu to help Mark gain complete control over his multiple personalities. The God's experiment works, and for the first time in a long time, Mark is assuredly in the driver's seat. The stakes escalate for Moon Knight when it is revealed that he and Marlene actually have a child together. Beatrice, who is kidnapped by Sun King, the avatar of Amon-Ra, the ancient chief Egyptian god, and Bushman. Pursuing the villains to their base at Isla Ra, he overcomes Sun King in a battle of spirits and takes the god's followers for himself. However, a shocking twist is revealed when Ernst, the long-lost family friend who is the catalyst for Mark's development of dissociative identity disorder, is shown to be behind this scheme. The Nazi sympathizer perpetrates this in an attempt to break down Mark's will and lure the hero to his side. Refusing, Mark kills Ernst and receives some aid from Sun King in escaping. Later, Moon Knight sets out to accumulate more and more power after receiving a vision of the end of the world. Similar to the character of Doctor Strange Supreme in Disney Plus's What If animated series, Mark does this to stop the apocalypse, and to this end, gives in completely to the whims of Khonshu. The deity takes over Manhattan, rechristens it New Thebes City, and dreams of conquering the rest of the world. Mark realizes his patron god is spiraling out of control, and so he absorbs the Phoenix Force to combat him. He's freed from the Phoenix when Thor literally knocks it out of him with his hammer, Mjolnir. And I gotta say, when I saw this on the page, I laughed out loud at how comic booky this solution was. It was awesome. Then, a new status quo for the Moon Knight. He returns to Manhattan free of Khonshu's influence and establishes a congregation by the name of Midnight Mission, which is a homage to his sidekick of years past. He claims a portion of the city as his own, and now, upon the moon settling in amongst the stars, the residents of Manhattan can glimpse the ghostly figure of their troubled protector by its light, the Moon Knight. Mark Spector has a troubled history, but one that can nevertheless serve as an inspiring work of character development, overcoming disability, and choosing a code of morality over simply inheriting one. Moon Knight is firmly cemented in the realm of the supernatural thanks to the influence of Khonshu, but can speak to fans outside of that narrow circle. I am particularly fascinated by the character's perpetual war within himself, referring to his mental illness. Moon Knight poses an imperative question: can one be mentally unwell and beneficial to society? And the answer, by virtue of principle and Moon Knight's demonstration, is a resounding yes. The spiritual and the super certainly go well together, but Moon Knight's history gives us another great pairing, that of the suffering and the super. Let us know in the comments below what you think about Moon Knight or a character that you'd like to see us cover next. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.